I think we made a mistake with the title. I think if we had put something like "Port something," the room would be full, because I was in the session earlier. It was full, and they were talking about ports, except for Bolivia, which doesn't have a port. Resilient. Or I should have also put resilient. Resilient ports. And we are focusing on the transport sector. So we are talking about responsible business conduct. And resilient is a good word, because earlier in the session they were talking about resilience as well. In this case, we're not talking about the logistics of shipping. We're talking about the human element. The human element and the responsibility of business in ensuring that the human factor, yes, sir? So, for this session, we're also looking at the instruments that enable or that make it possible to operationalize the concept of responsible business conduct. So we're going to talk about the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. We're going to talk about two ILO instruments, the multinationals, the ILO Tripartite Declaration on Principles Concerning Multinational Enterprises and Social Policy. In the ILO, we call it the M&E Declaration. And we're also going to, in passing, talk about the OECD Guidelines on Multinational Enterprises and Responsible Business Conduct. The session will therefore give an overview on global trends, on the responsibilities and the due diligence of business. To help us to do that, we have a facilitator, Mr. John Blick, who is my colleague from the ILO, who is a specialist on enterprise. We have a panel, so I will hand over to him. We have a panel with representative from business, Ms. Sanila Sanford from Barbados Employers Confederation. I'll give more detail. We also have Fabrizio Barcelona. I got that right?
For the first time ever.
For the first
time? In an event.
I was listening carefully. I was excited when I heard that I will chair a session with somebody with this name. Those with football intentions, let's just put it this way. If you know, you know. Otherwise, forget about it. We also have from the UNIDO, my colleague Martin Lukmnaya, who will help us with this session. But allow me, before we get into the details of the session itself, to make a few observations about responsible business conduct and decent work in the transport sector as part of global supply chain. Just give me a minute as my email opens. There we are. So, there we are. So the principles of responsible business conduct for enterprises is to ensure that enterprises can make the contribution that they already make related to economic growth and social progress. And in the process also realizing work that is decent for people who are working in the sector. We know that there is also, on the other hand, difficulties and challenges that are faced in the operations. And therefore the aim is how do we reduce and minimize the challenges and maximize the benefits. Maximize the benefits for enterprises, for the working people in the sector, for society at large. for the environment and for society. And therefore, we will dwell a bit on the three instruments that I talked about, which are worth repeating: the United Nations Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights, the ILO Tripartite Declaration of Principles concerning multinational enterprises and social policy, and the OECD Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises and Responsible Business Conduct. These are instruments that are used by the private sector and also by public entities, including trade and investment, in trade and investment agreements. We know, of course, that transport is a crucial driver for social and economic development, and that it is actually indeed one of the truly global industries, and it employs many people at different, let's say, elements of that value chain. And therefore, the challenge of in providing adequate employment protection and limiting precarious working conditions, which we know can be prevalent if they are not looked at specifically. We know the plight, particularly of seafarers during COVID, and the real challenges they faced when they were not allowed, while at sea, to come and dock into some ports when they could not access medication because they were outside of the jurisdictions of national origin. So all of this to say the issue of responsible business conduct is therefore absolutely critical. In this regard, the ILO has come up with a landmark convention, which is called the Maritime Labour Convention, which came into force in August 2013, which became the first binding international law on looking at the welfare, the living standards, the minimum working conditions for seafarers and those people on ships. It is one of ILO's most ratified conventions, and here in the Caribbean, the following countries have ratified this convention: Bahamas, Belize, Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And therefore, in line with this, the ILO in the region were offering different sectoral approaches to enhance, and the participant earlier is right, sectoral resilience. So I have found a way to put that word in, resilience. And more governments are actually incorporating responsible business conduct expectations in national and international, in their regional legislation. This session will therefore give an overview of these global trends, and I have the distinguished panel to do that. Let me start to formally introduce the facilitator, John Blick. But before I hand over to him, allow me to give a bit of background on the three panelists themselves. Fabrizio Barcellona is from the International Transport Federation of Seafarers and Inland Navigation Sections Coordinator. He has worked variously in the Navy, in Italy. He has worked in the public and private sectors on dry cargo and tankers and cruise ships. He is then joined International Transport Federation as an inspector and has held different positions. He is now currently the Seafarers and Inland Navigation Coordinator. Sanela Sanford is from Barbados Employers Confederation Council and is currently the trade group representative for transport and logistics. She's also the head of human resources at the Caribbean markets at Inchcap. And those who know that Inchcap is one of the global firms in the sector. Martin Lukmeyer is the industrial development expert from UNIDO, and he is spearheading the global network of regional sustainable energy centers and is managing its portfolio in small island developing states. With this introduction, let me hand over then to John to continue the session. John, over to you.
Yes, thank you. Well, lovely to have this high-quality audience. Often it's not in the numbers, but it's in the quality. Likewise, we can say of the participants of the panel, of course, we are very pleased to have all of you here. This is all of you have decade-long experience or decades working in this working area. So we are excited about this panel, and we are excited to have you here. From an ILO perspective, we feel it's crucial not only to speak about, of course, the technicality of the sector, but also speak on its potential to generate decent work, as our director was just mentioning. Responsible business conduct is vital also for the success of business. We can have a very sound technical business, but we need also to think on how can we be responsible, because responsibility also means reputation. If we are a responsible business, our reputation enhances. It means reputation externally towards the persons that buy from us or that supply to us, but it also means internally that we become more reliant to the people that work for us. So in this session, we will focus on responsible business conduct from different perspectives. Our director has already addressed some perspectives from the ILO, has mentioned the international framework that exists, the different declarations. But we will now look into what are the perspectives from different points of view on this, and what are practical solutions. So I hope really that this session brings two things. One, practical takeaways from you, that you will see, well, as a business or as workers, we can take this element and we can implement it in our practice. And first and secondly, that it will motivate further exchange. So these are two things that I hope. I hope it will be an interactive session. We are a small group, so we really, I plead you, we depend on you to make this an interactive session. Each one of you has to speak at the end. So, without delaying further, I would like to start with the perspective of business. We have here the representative of the employers' organization, the Barbadian Employers Confederation, represented here by Ms. Sanella Sanford. Ms. Sanella, thank you for being with us. And I would like to ask you a question. With regards to international expectations on business, there's high expectations that they should contribute in a positive way to sustainable development and ensure that business operations do not have a negative impact on people and on planet. We see this in different ways, and we see this in, for instance, regulation of the government that has become more strict also on business compliance on different issues. The urgency is strongly felt in Barbados. If you look at the environmental issues, for instance, it's strongly felt because you're directly affected. And on the other hand, we also see it at the side of the consumers. The consumers become also more demanding on business, on what it should comply with. So my concrete question to you is, in this scenario, what is needed, in your point of view, to make further progress on respecting human rights in business operation, and what do you see as important opportunities for that? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your question. Just to give some perspective from which I'll be speaking, yes, you did mention that I represent the Employers Confederation in Barbados as a representative for transport and logistics. But also from an organizational point of view, being part of an organization that is one of the largest global distributor of automobiles, I want to answer from that perspective as well. So speaking on behalf of Inchcape as well, in terms of being in 40 countries, 22,000 employees, responsible business is one of the key topics for us. In fact, we just released our sustainability report. But more specifically, with regards to your question, and beyond the policy frameworks, beyond the expectations that are placed by government and consumers, we see this as an important part of our business. In fact, one of the key pillars of our revised strategy is actually responsible business. So we have 4 or 5 elements of our strategy, and we see that responsible business underpins our entire business strategy in all of our 40 markets. Now, what does that look like for us as it relates to people? So I want to speak from a people's perspective. What does it look like for us? It looks like creating opportunities where people have the right to show up as their true diverse self. It also means having the right to show up in an environment that is safe. So two of the key areas that we've been focusing on over the last year is as it relates to inclusion and diversity and safety in the workplace. The BEC as well also has taken the forefront in pushing and advocating for safety in the workplace, and there are a number of initiatives that they have that I will speak on a bit later. But from our organizational perspective, what does the right to being diverse, or a workplace that appreciates you for who you are, what does that look like in practical terms? So I just want to take it down to more practical elements. So for example, it means for us mandatory training for our leaders and our colleagues, whether it's in terms of unconscious bias, whether it's in terms of teaching our leaders about inclusive hiring practices, ensuring that, for example, at the very basic level, our candidate shortlists are diverse. That's something that we've mandated. We're very big on women in leadership programs, and this year, for example, we have specific targets as it relates to improving the percentage of women in senior leadership level. So we've been doing a lot of work as it relates to ensuring that people have the right to show up as their true, authentic self as it relates to inclusion and diversity. We also believe that people have a right to work in a safer environment and can go back home to their families. So again, there are so many opportunities in the health and safety space, whether it's ensuring that we develop a culture of safety across our organization, that we have the right training, that we raise the standards within our organization beyond what is mandated by law or what is mandated by our partners. And we know that the future is all about EVs, whether it's personal vehicles or commercial vehicles. So we know that we have a specific, a real obligation in terms of electromobility and risk management as it relates to that. In terms of the BEC in Barbados, we've been at least making it easier for folks to comply with the requirements of safety, or the right to exist in a safe environment. So one of the things I'll mention, for example, from the BEC that they have in place is what they refer to as an OSH box, where employers within Barbados can get everything compliance-related, checklists, how to run safety committee meetings, everything in one go from the Employers Confederation. So again, beyond high-level policy, there's a lot happening on the ground in Barbados and globally.
Thank you kindly, Sanella. Can I ask you a follow-up question on this? Like as a business, you took a certain decision that requires quite strong commitment to be so responsible in different elements. How was this process? What do you think that started this awareness to go for this sustainability strategy in its different elements? It's an environmental, people. Can you tell us something more about this?
So I think the company recognized that being a responsible business doesn't necessarily adversely affect our bottom line, but in fact that we had a greater obligation to promote responsible business, to promote mobility, because of the impact that we have in so many markets across the world, across so many families, because of the level of staffing that we had. So for us, it was an easy decision, and we saw it as a tool that could drive business rather than as an obstacle.
Okay, thank you. For the people that arrive later, I think this is a very interesting example. This is a very large company, Inkscape, that is a market leader in its segment in distribution of automobiles. I think it's known to most of us. And also the fact that they have practical tools. You mentioned that also in the employers' organization you have practical tools that can also be used by others in their businesses. Can you tell us something a bit more about these OSH tools, for instance?
Okay, sure. So it's referred to as what we call an OSH box. Just so I don't miss anything, it allows members to quickly implement any necessary safety and health tools and measures, and allows companies to comply with local legislation, because we are based in Barbados. So, of course, any documentary requirements, compliance requirements, safety delegate committee operational manuals, draft terms of reference, anything that you will need to easily comply. So we take the work out of it for employers, so that everything that they have, everything that they need is already there. The work has already been done.
Lovely, thank you. I see that we're getting more popular by the minute. Huh? The room is filling up. Thank you all for coming. So we had the perspectives from the employers, from business, on the area of responsible business conduct and the generation of decent work. So now I would like to give the floor to the workers. We have here the representative. I have to pronounce your name correctly now, after my director. Barcelona.
Challenge.
Barcelona.
You got it.
Is it good?
So,
Yeah? Okay.
twice in a day.
Lovely. Okay, I will go straight into the question, Fabrizio. So what are the decent work challenges for workers in the transport sector? Let's start with that. Yeah.
Thank you, John, and thank you everyone that taken your time to attend this session. And I don't want to be seen as the one that bear negativity to an otherwise vibrant and positive forum, but I've been asked to mention the challenges. However, to put in a bit of a positive way, I would like to say that when there is a challenge, there is an opportunity. Once you have identified the challenges, then if you are serious and work together, it's possible to reverse the challenge and make it something that can satisfy everyone and work. And as you, John, has asked, there are unfortunately quite few challenges for transport workers. I think you can agree with me that the past decade or so, a considerable and fair amount of attention was given more to the manufacturer worker, the one that create, build, assemble products because of their condition that's been in the public eye for some times. On the contrary, when it comes to transport worker, not the same level of attention was given. And this lack of visibility took an extreme turn during the pandemic. And the director has already mentioned briefly in his introduction, the transport worker has been pretty much abandoned by everyone. They've been abandoned by the country they were coming from. They have been denied medical attention that caused a few of them dying away from home. And they've been asked to work beyond their contractual term. Some of them has been forced to stay away from home for up to 2 years without any hope to return home. And this only because they provide the essential service to avoid depriving us from the essential and non-essential goods sometimes that otherwise we have not been able to receive because stopping the transport industry, it will stop the supply chain. This is the reality. I think that one of the challenges, John, you have asked is the extreme fragmentation of outsources in services from the global brand. Notionally, I think that it's fair to say that transport workers are known to be a multinational workforce that often working for third-party enterprises that have not a defined jurisdiction or applicable legislation to protect the fundamental right of workers. And if allow me just a brief example, we are here in this beautiful Barbados and not far from the port downtown in the Bridgetown. And many of you have seen during this week, or those that live locally, many ships going in and out. And this, you look at the ship, you see a flag at the back of the ship. Let's put for the sake of an example of Malta or Maltese vessel. But then the owner of that vessel that is registered in Malta might be Italian or German. And the manager that runs that ship sits somewhere in an office in Greece. And the crew on board of that ship probably is made by 2 Romanian, 5 Filipino, and 10 Chinese. So you understand the complexity of providing the necessary support and the necessary kind of legislation to protect the interests of those workers. But also there is, in my opinion, also the lack of understanding of the major brand to where transport workers sit in the supply chain that transport their product. It seems that the big brand thinks that the transport workers is somebody else's problem. but also the negative influence of charter and shippers that impose quite stringent contract on the transport enterprises that have a limited option, and that result in extreme pressure put on the workers in the transport transport enterprises. But also, I must say that some of the big brands that they have in place auditing system on their operation, they have clearly failed to identify, prevent, mitigate, and remedy the environment, social, and governance risk when it comes to transport worker. They might as well work well for their direct employed, but not for the transport worker that carry their goods. And the same big brand, they lack of a coordination because they have or they are powerful enough to determine and establish standard horizontally. What I mean by horizontally, just agree themselves standards that then can implement vertically along the supply chain. And by doing that, they fail the workers along the supply chain, because those standards doesn't need to be too strong, need to be firm on principle, but adaptable to the reality of the enterprise that need to be applicable and for them to be successful. And then, because I'm mindful of the time, I just conclude my initial list that could be much longer, but again, in taking into account the time we have available, I'll stop there. And when it comes to transport workers, especially for those that are transnational, there is a complete failure to provide them with the minimum benefits that are enjoyed by the direct employee workers, such as access to social security, medical attention at times, and access to any form of social protection. So, John, I'll leave it at that, and if you have any follow-up question, I'll be happy to respond. Thanks.
Thank you, Fabrizio, for your clarity and also the impressive nature and magnitude of the problem. I think when I started reading into this, I'm not a marine expert. I don't work for a port or for a boating company or whatever. But if you look at the magnitude and how it was visualized by COVID, this kind of struck me also. Because if you see, for instance, what he's speaking about, abandoned, without medical attention, these are really very severe issues that these workers had to face. So I think the pandemic, how horrible it was and how horrible the consequences have been, they have visualized this problematic a lot stronger to us. And I think that's why it's also so important to have this session on responsible business conduct. I think we all have part of the puzzle. We are representing many different actors in the marine or in the transport sector that have part of the solution for this problem. And I think this debate, helps us to reflect on what potential solution can be. And then, Fabrizio, that would be my next question. So if you look at this debate on responsible business conduct, what can be done by business, multinationals, by ports, etc.? What do you think can be a role? What do you see as potential attractive initiative to work on these problematic issues?
But I think, thank you, John. I think we have a example practice that maybe I can talk slightly later if there is time. But as the International Transport Worker Federation, we have been working in cooperation with the Willing Global Enterprise. We have managed since 1948 to agree, check, and fix standard, primarily for maritime, but not limited to that, also for the road and to a certain extent to the civil aviation. And we intend, we have done already, we are moving now to embrace all transport mode, just to make sure that there is attention, because the transport worker, either they are coming from sea, from land, or from air, are the key that can ensure that the shift of the economic production to east, to a certain extent, to the south of the world, manage to have the necessary support to carry the product to where the people can afford to buy them. And we have developed a model through partnership with the global employers or organizations that represent them in order to identify, prevent, mitigate actual and potential adverse impact, looking also at the root causes. And how we did that, we just been a combination of the soft law that is represented by the existing guidelines at the regional or international level, and the hard law in certain countries that already have a policy within their legislation. Or at times, and the director has mentioned earlier, the Maritime Labour Convention, utilizing treaty and convention. So the combination of all this and the willingness of global brand and institution to work together has created a model that is not the perfect one, but is something out there.
Thank you, Fabrizio. So I deduct that somehow we are moving in the right direction, that different activities are being undertaken, like we saw in other sectors, where you had like a lot of consumer pressure, for instance. If I take the example of textile, there was also a lot of problems with the workers, working conditions, and at some point pressure started growing also from a consumer perspective also. And this slowly started to build up into different type of standard setting enterprises that saw responsible business conduct as key to them to be, let's say, a valid partner for both buyers and suppliers. So I think if we are moving in the right direction, I hope this is recognizable, because I see many people here who play a certain role in this sector. People from the ports, they're from the Solomon Islands, Miss here from the Virgin Islands, I believe. So it will be interesting also afterwards, when we go to the Q&A part, to hear a bit your perspective on what has been told here today. But before that, I would like to go back to the employers, the Barbados Employers Organization, also to ask you a point of view from an employer's perspective. What could be initiatives, what kind of initiatives do you think can be worthwhile to be developed to support this? Thank you.
So I will approach it, I'll take a different approach to this. I will talk about something that is, I still think, very new. When we speak about initiatives and collaboration and creating solutions, I want to speak a little bit about what's happening in Barbados. So recently, the social partners would have signed on to what is termed Mission Barbados. And I think that's quite interesting and something that I would like to share a little bit about on behalf of the BEC and by extension the Private Sector Association, which is the signatory to the agreement. So the social partners signed on to Mission Barbados, which I think creates that intersection between what is needed for economic development and what is needed for workers in the country. So there are 6 missions or 6 goals that the intent is to achieve by 2030, and they surround climate and climate crisis, food and water, culture and crime, health and well-being, and poverty and empowerment. So just to give you a bit of a flavor of what the goals sound like, or the missions rather, the first one is that we will become a clean and beautiful large ocean state, championing sustainable development locally and globally, with the goal of all domestic activities being 100% sustainable by 2035. Another one being to transform Barbados into a country of active, involved citizens. All Barbadians will feel empowered and engaged in the social, economic, and cultural development of the country as confident, creative, compassionate, and entrepreneurial citizens. So there are a series of missions, and of course, the social partners still have to flesh out the actions, but I think that's quite interesting in terms of collaborative initiatives and solutions to challenges that impact the economy and by extension the workers in the country.
Thank you, Ms. Sanford. And I would like to ask the same question to Mr. Barcelona, also on what other initiatives, collaborations. I'm hearing also from Ms. Sanford the necessity to collaborate. And I think this resonates a lot of also what the International Labour Organization, the ILO, stands for. One of our main roles is to promote social dialogue between the different actors. In this case, the government, the employers, and the workers. And therefrom, we hope that solutions arise and that can support better working conditions, better business, higher economic growth, and all these higher goals. So I think it's good that we are hearing the element of collaboration, the necessity to collaborate to really make responsible business conduct and the creation of decent work a success. Mr. Barcelona had the same question. So what other initiatives can we think about, can we take away that would be worthwhile to explore? Thank you.
Thank you, John. I think that I'm coming from the perspective that I don't think that we need to reinvent the wheel, but we need to take inspiration from some of the principles that has been mentioned at the outset of this session that are already there, at the ILO, the UN principle, the ILO guidelines, the OECD guidelines, and work together on that. And you have mentioned the ILO, and I will take the example of the model of the ILO where the tripartite mode there assists the stakeholder to agree, disagree at times, but also to negotiate to bridge the gaps and try to find a consensus on an instrument, a tool that doesn't need to be too rigid, but need to be implementable. And if I may, we have limited to maritime, because that's what I'm familiar with. We have example in maritime. It had been mentioned in other session of the Maritime Just Transition, which is a group, a task force of organization that the ITF is part with, alongside with International Chamber of Shipping, that normally sit opposite to where we sit, and the Global Compact that they put together, set aside their differences on the basis that we agree on what we agree, to create the necessary framework to look at the recruitment of seafarers in the future, how to ensure that there is the necessary change in the infrastructure to engage or assist women that they want to join the profession, how to look at the retention of seafarers on board ships, or the global partnership, again with other partners in the industry that, based on the existing minimum standard, look at how company can go over and beyond to guarantee there are some benefit and looking at the well-being of the workers on board. And to conclude, there is another example, which I think is the first and only example in any other industry, which is the International Bargaining Forum, that is an effort to put together the two biggest representative organizations of seafarers and ship owner and manager, and create a framework agreement that is global and can be applied to every seafarer around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrizio, and thank you, Ms. Sanford, also for all these interesting examples that you have given that surely will serve as inspiration. Now, I would like to go to our friends from UNIDO, the industrial organization of the ILO, who will also speak on sustainable supply chains and certain elements within sustainable supply chains. I see that you have a small presentation to share. Obviously, we can come back to Fabrizio and to Sanella also later with questions. At the end, we will have a questions session. So Fabrizio, the floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Fabrizio Martin.
Yes.
Okay. It's a pleasure to be here today in beautiful Barbados, Bridgetown. Always a pleasure to be here. My name is Martin Luckmeyer. I'm working for UNIDO, which is based in Vienna. And I'm usually not coming from, let's just say, supply chain sector. I'm not coming also from the economy side. I'm not coming also from the social side. I'm coming personally more from the energy side and environmental side of sustainability, basically. So I think we are quite complementary. But I'm substituting today a colleague of mine who is working basically on sustainable supply chains, and I do my best to convey the message to you basically today. And what I will present to you today is just a brand new publication. It's called White Paper on Skills Development for Fair Production and Sustainable Supply Chains. And I think you were mentioning the solutions. And you were mentioning solutions, now on policy side, standard side, regulatory side. But then, because the entire supply chain is a long supply chain, and you have the multinational, let's just say, downstream companies, and then you have the small, medium-sized upstream companies, and there are a lot of stakeholders to be trained, actually. And there's this need for regulations not to train people. We have here the people also from ports, now, for example. You need to train a lot of stakeholders, multiple stakeholders, basically, in the maritime sector, for example. So basically, this is this white paper is also connected with a curriculum what UNIDO has developed with private sector also together, a standard curriculum for trainings for skills development for supply chains, covering the environmental side, covering the social side, but covering also the economic side. And also it can be customized then depending on the sector, for example, the maritime sector. You add up some modules. This publication is already available on the website of UNIDO, and also this curriculum is currently revamped a bit. It's complemented. It will be also online during the next few weeks, my colleagues told me. With that, I will go now into the presentation. Just to say a bit at the beginning what UNIDO does. UNIDO is the Industrial Development Agency of the United Nations. So basically, we are promoting inclusive and sustainable industrial development. Here we're working closely with the emerging countries, but we're also working with the least developed countries and also with the small island developing states, basically. And usually we're addressing the challenges within 3 areas. Our new Director General made the supply chains work one of its priority. And one of the first pillar is that we are assisting countries on building sustainable supply chains so that developing country producers get a fair deal basically out of that. And also we use the scarce resources wisely in terms of circular economy. Another element is limit climate breakdown and also other negative impacts on the environment by mainstreaming renewables, energy and resource efficiency, and circular economy. And there's a lot of interlinkages here in Barbados. You have some fantastic young entrepreneurs. I work here also with some entrepreneurs here, going into the green circular economy. And it also links to many of the issues which were addressed, also on safety, for example. Electric mobility has safety issues, and you need to train people to deal with accidents, for example, of electric mobility is just one example. And then one of our priorities is also ending hunger, and that means that agro-business, basically working with the value chains and supply chains of agro-business. So what is for us supply chains? We here basically compliant with the UN Global Compact. Now we say supply chains is the management of environmental, social, and economic impacts, and the encouragement of good governance practices throughout the life cycle, what you mentioned also before, which is already partly in place. No? And basically through those policies also on global level and working with the big corporates also, you can also work towards the sustainable development goals and also sustainability, because we have to be in mind, I'm coming now from the environment sector now, but we have to be in mind that 10,000 suppliers globally are responsible basically for I think around 50-60% of the GHG, or even 70% of the GHG emissions, and we have the small and medium-sized companies on the upstreaming side, which also together responsible, if you aggregate them, for 50% of the GHG emissions. So if you work here with smart supply chain policies, global, regional, nationally, you can change a lot. Actually, it brings us further. No? And this was not seen in the past, so like this. Now, in the meantime, we have some legislations by different countries, and those legislation in Europe, for example, so many of the bigger corporations have to be compliant with that. I have to be faster. So now, one of the solutions is skills development, and here are some challenges because supply chains are very complex. You have to integrate many players, and basically you have to create platforms also with the downstream and upstream companies, and also with the public sector. No? And it's sometimes not so easy also to bring everybody together. What is there is also a lack of really curriculums which cover that entirely, in a comprehensive way, holistic way. So curriculums which are adapted to the realities of the country, not just a standard curricula from Europe or from the US. A standard curricula for small island developing states, Solomon Island, Pacific Islands are very different, which I know well also. And the Caribbeans are different, Barbados is different. So you need to come to qualification and certification frameworks on these areas which are currently not existing because everybody works in silos. You have something on energy, you have something on environment, you have something on chemicals, you have something on social, but it's not comprehensively addressed. And also to deal with the new areas which are upcoming, because we are going into a lot of emerging sectors now, Industry 4.0, we're going into circular economy and so on. So now there are some barriers for skills development. Like I mentioned before, there are multiple layers in supply chains, and it's not easy because you have the upstream companies, the downstream companies, they sometimes don't know even their own suppliers from downstream, and those relationships are very, because they want to have the best price, they're keeping all to be safe, no, they just do short-term contracts, but this is not this does not help the sustainability of supply chains if there's just the short-term view. So skills development regarding that, I think you mentioned it also, creating the awareness that you can to have long-term partnerships and as beneficials is very important. I will then, because I don't have so many minutes, but we can maybe discuss also later, I will just maybe some words here. Also, why it's so essential to have the sustainable skills for suppliers, and which are the areas we need to work on. So sustainable business and green skills is, for example, one. So how to train people, how you can create more local added value also, how you can comply with social standards and reduce environmental impacts. At the same time, leapfrogging to new technologies is an important area because in many countries, many young entrepreneurs, SMEs, they are not aware about the new solutions, technology, like you could use here. Barbados, again, example, using seaweed for all kind of end uses, for example, no? And bringing that into the picture. Also then helping companies to manage on the reporting on environmental, social governance, or such frameworks, what you need for the new international agreements also. I will not go into the detail. Here are some UNIDO examples. I can make it flag also later. But thank you very much for the time. I think it was already too long, right?
Tiny bit. Thanks a lot, Martin, for your excellent presentation. As a disappointment, I have to break a promise that I made to you at the start of the session. Some might recall, if you think back, because I said I will give the floor to everyone in the room, but then we had 5, and now we have 40, so that won't happen. So I would like to give the floors to 2 or 3 questions. Yes, I will give you the microphone, and then you, and then you. Yes, thank you.
Good afternoon to the panel. My name is Andre Petit. I'm from Azalea Ferries Limited, which is a startup regional fast ferry service company. It hasn't started as yet, but I'm looking for finance in order to start the fast ferry service in the Caribbean region. But in relation to this panel, my whole comment is in relation to safety and training safety and the new renewable fuels, in relation to new renewable fuels that in terms of shipping would be a problem for shipping. So let me start by safety. In the maritime sector, all cruise ships and whatever ships that work You understand? From cruise ships back down to cargo ships. The thing is, all crews must be trained properly and highly trained. And crew also has to do drills on board the ships on a daily basis or every weekly basis. You understand? Also, safety. Safety of the crew is very important because with these drills for training, also have to practice on board the ship. Okay? The crew has to go through all this training, even on a cruise ship. When you see a cruise ship coming to the Caribbean or any port at all, sometimes you can't see the crew doing training at any day. Cargo ships have to go through training once the ship is sailing at sea. Cargo ships has to go through various types of drills. And they also have to take their own safety because working on a ship of, let me say, a gas carrier, safety is very important. You cannot smoke on a ship. You understand? You cannot smoke on a ship. Smoking would cause a fire on the ship. Okay? Various other things with self in terms of safety. If a man fall overboard or if a man fall down on deck and hurt himself, it's going to be problems on board the ship. But they're supposed to got a medic crew to assist that person. Okay? Let me get into the points of now the fuel types. We talk about climate change. All right, peoples? We talk about climate change. But in the shipping industry, there is a problem with this whole climate fuels. Diesel is king in the shipping industry. Okay? Diesel is king. Still is today. But we try to change the whole fuel types to these new fuel types, and it's going to pose a serious challenge. Let me start by using green hydrogen. Green hydrogen, okay, is a fuel type, a new fuel type that they're working on, but it's an old fuel type as well. We look at the Lindenberg. Anybody ever hear about the Lindenberg situation? Google or YouTube the Lindenberg peoples, and you would understand the Lindenberg was an airship. Years ago, back in the 1930s, again, a little history. Back in the 1930s, the Lindenberg was sailing in the air, and it caught a fire whilst landing. And nobody survived that landing. That particular airship was using hydrogen fuel. So I'm taking the reference because of using green hydrogen today, all the talk of the safety issues that companies, shipping companies, and carrier companies looking to do green hydrogen, it is a problem in terms of safety. Would you like to go up on a vessel that using hydrogen and then catch a fire and everybody dead? No. It's a problem to the, I push this to the panel. Green ammonia, okay. Green ammonia is another one that they're working on in the shipping industry. Green ammonia is acid. Ammonia is also used in the agricultural sector. You understand? It can also be made as a bomb. Okay? Now, green ammonia is very hazardous for an engineer. Engineer working in the engine room of any vessel. Pardon me? Yes, please. Yes, please. All right. I can make it short and simple now. You see, electrics. No, I can finish with the electric system, the ion batteries. In shipping, if you use lithium-ion batteries for shipping, it's going to pose a problem for long-range shipping. It might work for short sea shipping to a certain extent, but using a lithium-ion battery for electric vessels and stuff in the shipping industry, it's still causing problems. It can't go too far. They're going to do 10 miles or 20 miles of itself, short range. Can't go too far because they're going to run out of juice. Okay? Cannot do 100 miles with a battery-powered vessel. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you for that excellent comment. I would suggest that we take rapidly the 3 remaining questions and then you answer them as a block, if that's okay. So I'll start with you. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Nelson Marino. How to break the pressure to ROI results and short-term results with the long-term necessities and long-term sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be try and be really brief. Question to Martin on the white paper, which is really interesting, by the way. I think you've done great work there. And I work in shipping, and one of the immediate questions that jumps up to me, because you said you've got a generic template, and for shipping you can just add some elements at the end.
which is very, very difficult, if I can be honest. The way that shipping is regulated, even the training to a T, it's not that simple to do that. There are lots of requirements that need to happen for training on that, and that happens with IMO and ILO, and there are training frameworks in place where that needs to be latched on. And I'm sure Fabrizio will respond on the just transition element to the question before. But my real question was really for Sanella, because I think everything you said was really actually quite inspirational. So my one question is, how do you measure DE&I, and do you track the progress within the company? And the other aspect would be, with respect to policy development on post-social aspects of the company, how involved are your workers in that process when you're talking about social aspects? If you could, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the question. Sorry.
Good afternoon. My question relates to seamen. Mr. Barcelona, basically you discussed all the traffic workers. We don't worry about Air Force or airplane or aviation, aside from aviation. We're worried about seamen. This is how it is that we're offering the Virgin Island basically is offering flag of convenience, and you mentioned that. In flag of convenience, the state flag is basically responsible for all the health and security of the workers, but we don't see that, or I'm not seeing it. I was wondering if the International Labour Organization is really communicating with ITF and is communicating with ISO and is communicating with FAA so that you all make sure that the flag states are responsible for the safety and security of seamen.
Thank you. A lot of questions to be answered. Maybe Fabrizio, if it's okay, do you want to answer some of the questions?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'll start with the last one, if you may. Now, you have mentioned the flag of convenience, and if you look at it, the ITF has been campaigning since 1948, so I'd say it's quite a long campaign. And if you look at it, such a long campaign must not have achieved what the intention were, and partially I can agree on that. But because of that campaign, certainly the standard on the flag of convenience has been raised dramatically because of the attention on it. And we continue. We haven't given up to assist, to make sure that seafarers' working and living conditions are on improvement all the time. You have mentioned both the IMO and ILO. And on both organizations, we are working to continuous improvement. Later on, there will be a session on the Maritime Labour Convention, which I suggest that if you have time, you can attend, how we work cooperatively all together to continuously improve the condition at sea. Now, you mentioned the civil aviation, and I just very briefly mentioned that the ITF has opened an office in Montreal just to try to replicate what we're doing in maritime with ICAO. Is a long way away, so hopefully we'll not have to wait another 70 years to hear something positive, but just because you mentioned that you are from the civil aviation, I wanted to mention that. And while I got the mic, I also wanted to answer to the gentleman question about alternative fuels that are brought in the maritime to decarbonize the industry. The approach, what I mentioned earlier, the Maritime Just Transition Task Force, that was we feel the need together with partners to set up this organization, this task force, just to provide a unified voice from maritime, from the industry, to make sure that in the process that will take place at the IMO primarily, and to a certain extent at the ILO, our voice are heard. On more practical terms, the Maritime Just Transition has just concluded or about to conclude a training model for submission to the IMO to create the interim guidance on how seafarers need to be trained on ship that will eventually utilize an alternative fuel than what it is today. And then, of course, we are concerned, as you are, of hydrogen, ammonia, ethanol that are the proposed new fuels for shipping going ahead. And our position is safety first. Let's not venture in building ships without being tested, without hear the operator of those ships, in this case seafarers, that altogether can provide the necessary advice on how to make the ship safe and secure for the seafarers, for the environment, for the coastal community, and for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Also the same for Ms. Sanford. Several questions for you.
Sure, thank you for your question. I think you asked in terms of how we track progress. We do have, so I'll start from there. We do have a sustainability report that is published publicly. We started tracking in 2021, and last week we released our latest sustainability report where we track all the elements, whether it's related to people, the planet, practices and places, which is our 4 Ps of responsible business. And I think the second part was how do we get employees involved. I think one of the things we're very guilty of is we survey a lot, we ask a lot of questions, and we communicate a lot. Each market and each cluster would have their own responsible business plan, and that a lot of that is fed by what we hear from employees and what is important for the particular market or cluster. So, for example, in the Caribbean market, we know that as it relates to inclusion and diversity, we know that the involvement of women is key. Also in the Caribbean market, we know that we're still building our safety culture and that we're not quite there yet. So we know that our targets and our goals are surrounding that. And we do have global targets, and we do have more specific regional targets that we have to hit as well as it relates to that. But a lot of it does come from the ground. And we've also made sure that our employees understand the strategy around responsible business, because there's a roadshow that we do that is led by employees where they have to understand and articulate what that strategy is and present it to other employees.
Thank you, Ms. Sanford. Some additional comments, Martin, from your side?
Maybe I think I take the environmental one. To be on the safe side. And but also to you now, definitely, no. Also, this white paper is more focused on the manufacturing sector, less on ports and so on. And it has the general modules, but then for sure for each sector you need to have detailed modules. But sometimes they are existing; those models already existing somewhere, no. But for sure it's more a generic curriculum. I think this question with green hydrogen now is an important question, one, and I think it's just that we are not there, no, currently. So currently we are still in, let's say, in that the market is being built. We are still in demonstration, no, we are still in research and development. But as indicated also for the land transport, I mean, it has demonstrated it's feasible, no. So basically also, I'm sure that in some years, and I think there are also some technology deployment roadmaps indicate that in some years we are also there talking about these alternative fuels and use them safely also for the shipping industry and also for the aviation sector. So there's an indication for sure. But what is the alternative? To go back to the diesel or remain with the diesel, which is very costly, gets also very expensive. In Barbados, for example, in small island states, the prices, inflation is skyrocketing because the transport is so expensive. Is that the alternative? I don't think so. Is the alternative also the oil spills in the sea like we're having regularly? Who pays for those oil spills? It's also a question of sustainability. In the past, not always somebody paid for it, and not those who have caused it, oil spills. Is that the alternative? Or are we going into the future using green hydrogen, which is clean? Basically, the safety issues, I think, can be solved. Now, what we see also in the in the land transport sector with green hydrogen, but still we are talking here about still some years until this technology will really come into, let's just say, industrial rollout. We are not there currently. But I think you raised very, very good points now regarding the safety. But I think it's this balloon from 40 is a long time. And in the meantime, you have already cars going on green hydrogen safely, and buses in many countries. Even in some small island states, you have the first green hydrogen buses in the meantime going safely.
Well, thank you, Martin, for your comments. And yeah, we are a tiny bit over time. If it's a very brief question, and if they allow us to stay in the room, because I also would like to give the floor to the ILO director with some closing remarks. But thank you for you.
Just a brief question, actually. This is with regard to the topic of promoting responsible business conduct. Now, to create a conducive workplace for the transport workers or even supply chain. So, just a question like, how do we measure the business? How the responsibility of, or how do we measure the effectiveness of, the business conduct in terms of, providing a conducive workplace for the supply chain? Because to my understanding, one of the things actually we are talking about supply chain efficiency, that it is a limitless efficiency goal that we have. And instead of actually the cost of human beings, we always look at the cost of capital. We also want to make our business more efficient, supply chain more efficient, and it's limitless. So how do we measure, how businesses actually, can or promote, ethical conduct actually, or the responsible conduct actually? How do we measure the efficacy? That's one of my questions actually.
I think it's an excellent question, and it provides a lot of food for thought. I don't know if one of the panelists rapidly want to respond on this, on the measurement of responsible business conduct. No, I think... yeah, it is addressed, but his question is very, very precise on, let's say, I've seen his presentation before on specific indicators, on efficiency. And so likewise, you could do, of course, with elements related to decent work. For instance, if we look at, rotation. Rotation of staff is an indicator also of the work environment. If we look at absence, for instance, sickness, leave. And so there are several indicators that are proxies to see where you're heading to, I would say, as an enterprise. So I think for now, that is what we can say in the, let's say, limited time that we have. But it's a lot of food for thought. I want to thank you all for these inspirational observations that you've done. Very good questions. The panelists also, excellent panelists, first class, well done. And then I would like to give the floor to Joni Musabayana, the director of the ILO Office for the Caribbean, to give some closing remarks. Thank you.
I don't know how I summarize in 30 seconds what was said in an hour, but I think I had three key things. The first is that responsible business conduct is an integral part of doing business. I think that is important, that it's part of the competitiveness of the business. It's not an addition to or taking the business away from what it should actually be doing. Responsible business conduct, looking at the occupational health and safety and well-being of workers, looking at inclusion and diversity. These are now essential requirements of doing business in the modern day. They are not add-ons, they are not nice to do things, they are at the core of what responsible business conduct should be in this day and age. That the importance of dialogue, I think Fabrizio, I got from you the point, there should be dialogue between employers, workers, and government on what the well-being, the competitiveness of the business, but the well-being of the workers in those businesses should be. And I think we had an example of a model partnership in the transport sector between employers and workers, but also the concept of Mission Barbados, a much wider national concept in which not only moving business, but moving the whole of society, moving the whole of the country by looking at these 6 drivers that were given. The importance of training, of skills, and skills for development, skills for sustainable supply chains is also very important. I think you end on this question of how do we measure it all? I think that may be something that we have to really take forward. How do we measure the efficacy of responsible business conduct? And I think it's clear that enterprises can no longer just measure themselves in terms of how much money they make. The more money, the better, at the expense of the well-being of the workers, at the expense of society, at the expense of the environment. I think I would put it like that, we now need new measures that are beyond just, let's say, dollars and cents, to the well-being of enterprises, of society, of the environment, of the earth, of the planet. So I think it was quite an inspirational session. I had the idea of the Maritime Compact, the idea of the International Bargaining Council as forums for dialogue, and the importance also of unified voices. The issue of I want to end again on this issue of let's say the technology of the future, the safety of green hydrogen, and that it shouldn't be that there's designs that are done and then as an afterthought we say, oh, by the way, what are the concerns and what are the impacts on safety and health? This should be built into the design and engineering of these new alternative ways of handling business. I see the lady in front of me showing a hand. I think she's telling me my 30 seconds are up. But thank you very much for coming to this session. I think she Oh, you want to talk about the MLC?
The amendment is coming into force in December 2024, but as far as I understand, there's for the seafarer debts, there's an idea that there's an experimental data gathering that's going to be going on during 2023, with first rounds of submissions by July. And I was wondering if you would, because it's going to be a global register, if that's going to help drive further policy, because policy tends to set the baseline of compliance, and then anyone who's doing really well, it goes above. But something as basic as seafarer debts, I'm thinking of something like enclosed spaces. People have been talking about this for 10 years, and we're still seeing debts year on year, and part of that is ship design, and we're in the process of looking at decarbonization, so ship design could be updated. But that's not the part that we're looking at somehow. Is it later? No, it says 2024 on the
I think she's quite excited as we are concluding. So there's another session.
Yes.
I think she's leading us into the other session. That's a good introduction to the next session that will come into this room.
Hold on on that.
Oh, so let me just say hello and goodbye. See you in the next session.
4:30, same room, 4:30
Yeah.
this afternoon.
There will be in this same room at 4:30 then a detailed discussion on the MLC that she's referring to. With that, let me thank as well, John. Thank the panelists again. Thank all of you for filling up the room with your observations. Sorry we couldn't give you more time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.